I was very, very glad. It shows that at last a reasonable and steady view of the matter is becoming prevalent among us. Having drunk his second cup of tea with cream and bread, Alexey Alexandrovich got up and was going towards his study. "And you've not been anywhere this evening? You've been dull, I expect?" he said. "Oh, no," she answered, getting up after him and accompanying him across the room to his study. "What are you reading now?" she asked. "Just now I'm reading Duc de Lille, Poésie des Enfers, he answered. "A very remarkable book." Anna smiled, as people smile at the weaknesses of those they love, and, putting her hand under his, she escorted him to the door of the study. She knew his habit, that had grown into a necessity, of reading in the evening. She knew, too, that in spite of his official duties, which swallowed up almost the whole of his time, he considered it his duty to keep up with everything of note that appeared in the intellectual world. She knew, too, that he was really interested in books dealing with politics, philosophy, and theology, that art was utterly foreign to his nature, but, in spite of this, or rather, in consequence of it, Alexey Alexandrovich never passed over anything in the world of art, but made it his duty to read everything. She knew that in politics, in philosophy, in theology, Alexey Alexandrovich often had doubts, and made investigations, but on questions of art and poetry, and, above all, of music, of which he was totally devoid of understanding, he had the most distinct and decided opinions. He was fond of talking about Shakespeare, Raphael, Beethoven, of the significance of new schools of poetry and music, all of which were classified by him with very conspicuous consistency. "Well, God be with you," she said at the door of the study, where a shaded candle and a decanter of water were already put by his armchair. "And I'll write to Moscow." He pressed her hand, and again kissed it. "All the same, he's a good man, truthful, good-hearted, and remarkable in his own line," Anna said to herself, going back to her room, as though she were defending him to someone who had attacked him and said that one could not love him. "But why is it his ears stick out so strangely?" Or has he had his hair cut? Precisely at 12 o'clock, when Anna was still sitting at her writing table, finishing a letter to Dolly, she heard the sound of measured steps in slippers, and Alexey Alexandrovitch, freshly washed and combed, with a book under his arm, came into her. It's time," said he, with a meaning smile, and he went into their bedroom. And what right had he to look at him like that? Thought Anna, recalling Vronsky's glance at Alexey Alexandrovitch. Undressing, she went into the bedroom, but her face had none of the eagerness which, during her stay in Moscow, had fairly flashed from her eyes and her smile. On the contrary, now the fire seemed quenched in her, hidden somewhere far away. Chapter 34. When Vronsky went to Moscow from Petersburg, he had left his large set of rooms in Morskaya to his friend and favorite comrade Petritsky. Petritsky was a young lieutenant, not particularly well connected, and not merely not wealthy, but always hopelessly in debt. Towards evening he was always drunk, and he had often been locked up after all sorts of ludicrous and disgraceful scandals, but he was a favorite both of his comrades and his superior officers. On arriving at 12 o'clock from the station at his flat, Vronsky saw, at the outer door, a hired carriage familiar to him. While still outside his own door, as he rang, he heard masculine laughter, the lisp of a feminine voice, and Petritsky's voice. "If that's one of the villains, don't let him in." Vronsky told the servant not to announce him, and slipped quietly into the first room. Baroness Schilting, a friend of Petritsky's, with a rosy little face and flaxen hair, resplendent in a lilac satin gown, and filling the whole room, like a canary, with her Parisian chatter, sat at the round table making coffee. Petritsky, in his overcoat, and the cavalry captain Kamerovsky, in full uniform, probably just come from duty, were sitting each side of her. "Bravo! Vronsky!" shouted Petritsky, jumping up, scraping his chair. "Our host himself." "Baroness, some coffee for him out of the new coffee pot." "Why, we didn't expect you." "Hope you're satisfied with the ornament of your study," he said, indicating the Baroness. "You know each other, of course?" I should think so, said Vronsky, with a bright smile, pressing the Baroness's little hand. What next? I'm an old friend. You're home after a journey, said the Baroness, so I'm flying. Oh, I'll be off this minute, if I'm in the way. You're home, wherever you are, Baroness, said Vronsky. How do you do, Kamerovsky? He added, coldly shaking hands with Kamerovsky. There, you never know how to say such pretty things, said the Baroness, turning to Petritsky. No, what's that for? After dinner I say things quite as good. After dinner there's no credit in them? Well, then, I'll make you some coffee, so go and wash and get ready, said the Baroness, sitting down again, and anxiously turning the screw in the new coffee pot. Pierre, give me the coffee, she said, addressing Petritsky, whom she called Pierre as a contraction of his surname, making no secret of her relations with him. I'll put it in. You'll spoil it. No, I won't spoil it. Well, and your wife? Said the Baroness suddenly, interrupting Vronsky's conversation with his comrade. We've been marrying you here. Have you brought your wife? No, Baroness. I was born a Bohemian, and a Bohemian I shall die. So much the better, so much the better. Shake hands on it. And the Baroness, detaining Vronsky, began telling him, with many jokes, about her last new plans of life, asking his advice. He persists in refusing to give me a divorce. Well, what am I to do? He was her husband, now I want to begin a suit against him. What do you advise? Kamerovsky, look after the coffee, it's boiling over. You see, I'm engrossed with business. I want a lawsuit, because I must have my property. Do you understand the folly of it, that on the pretext of my being unfaithful to him, she said contemptuously, he wants to get the benefit of my fortune. Vronsky heard with pleasure this light-hearted prattle of a pretty woman, agreed with her, gave her half-joking counsel, and altogether dropped at once into the tone habitual to him in talking to such women. In his Petersburg world all people were divided into utterly opposed classes.